This presentation will cover the information contained in the 2018 King County Jurisdiction Manual. We will also review some best practices for jurisdictions and some important reminders. Each year, King County Elections puts out an updated jurisdiction manual. This manual is meant to be a one-stop shop for jurisdiction administrators to find answers to their elections-related questions. That said, our staff is always happy to answer questions, discuss specific situations, or provide more detailed information. The manual is emailed to all jurisdictions, typically in December, and is posted on our For Jurisdictions page of the King County Elections website. During this presentation, we will cover the following topics: election calendar, jurisdiction survey, current office holders, candidate filing, ballot measures, voters pamphlet, and lastly, miscellaneous items. We will begin with the elections calendar. The first chapter of the manual covers the elections calendar for the year, including the dates of the elections and important deadlines. In Washington, there can be up to 4 elections a year, 2 special elections in the spring, and the primary and general election. Jurisdictions can request a ballot measure for any of these 4 elections. The election of candidates typically is limited to the primary or general election. Next is jurisdiction survey. State law requires that a survey requesting information about current office holders be sent to each jurisdiction by February 1st, with responses due by March 1st. King County Elections sends this survey each year to the over 140 jurisdictions in King County. The information in this survey is used to determine when offices are subject to election and to create some of the candidate filing materials. It is vital that King County Elections receives a response from all jurisdictions, whether or not that district is scheduled to have offices up for election that year or not. Next is current office holders. It is extremely important that King County Elections has accurate, up-to-date information for all current office holders. Our office must be notified immediately of any vacancy that occurs. Even if the vacancy will not cause the office to be up for election that year, we need to know as soon as it happens. The best way to notify our office is to send an email with the name of the person who has resigned, the position number, and the date the office became vacant. We need to have this information in writing. A phone call is not sufficient. Once the district has a short list of potential appointees, email that list to King County Elections. Include the full name of the person, both their name and date of birth if possible. Our staff will look the person up in the voter registration database and verify whether or not those persons are registered voters of the district. It is really important that jurisdictions do not just assume that these persons are registered to vote in their district. People move and forget to update their information, and it could be a potentially big problem for the district if they appoint someone who doesn't meet this qualification for holding office. Depending on the number of people to verify, King County Elections can usually verify the list and respond within the same day. Once a new office holder has been appointed, send another email to King County Elections and include the name of the person appointed, their address, date of birth, and effective date of the appointment. King County Elections will no longer create or send oaths of office for any office holder, elected or appointed. It has been brought to our attention that the actual oath language varies by office type, city, judicial, school, etc., and we do not want to put anyone in a situation of having incorrect oath language. Each jurisdiction will be responsible for providing an oath of office for all of their officials. State law has different requirements for jurisdictions to record their completed oaths of office. It is the responsibility of each jurisdiction to determine whether or not they are required to file the completed oath of office. The Recorder's Office does charge a fee for recording documents, which jurisdictions will be required to pay. Please do not send any oaths of office to King County Elections. We do not need them, and will mail them back. We cannot submit documents to be recorded for jurisdictions. For any questions about the recording process, contact the King County Recorder's Office. The Recorder's Office has also created a document listing the formatting requirements. Documents can be found online. The Jurisdiction Manual contains a chart produced by the Secretary of State's office related to oaths of office. The chart contains information on when oaths are administered to newly elected officials and legal requirements and citations for whether oaths need to be recorded. This chart isn't meant to take place of consulting with your district's legal counsel. Next, candidate filing. Candidate filing is May 14th through 18th this year. Any questions about the candidate filing process should be directed to King County Elections. Jurisdictions have no active role in this process, and as such, their resources, such as computers, staff, etc., of the district should not be used for anything candidate filing related. Candidates are responsible for submitting all of their own material. All candidates must be a registered voter of the jurisdiction for which they have filed for office. It is the candidate's responsibility to ensure he or she meets any and all other requirements, such as a residency requirement. For jurisdictions with district positions, King County Elections only verifies that the candidate is registered in the overall district. Our staff does not confirm that the candidate resides in the district position for which they are filing, such as a specific director district within a school district. It is the jurisdiction's responsibility to make sure the elected official resides within the boundaries of that district and meets any other requirements for office before that person takes office. Any concerns about this process should be directed to the jurisdiction's legal counsel. For jurisdictions that fall into more than one county, the primary county conducts the candidate filing and issues certificates of election. The primary county is the one that has the majority of the voters. A list of shared jurisdictions is included in the Jurisdiction Manual. The primary county is indicated in the chart. Next, ballot measures. Jurisdictions can submit a resolution or ordinance requesting a ballot measure for any of the 4 annual elections. Each measure must be submitted with the required cover sheet, which is available on the King County Elections website. All ballot measure documents can be submitted by email, mail, fax, or in person. Our office prefers to receive documents via email. If submitting via email, please do not also mail, fax, or bring in person. King County Elections only needs to have one submission of the materials. Our staff will confirm that the materials have been received. Important reminder, all materials must be received no later than 4:30 p.m. on the due date. Postmarks do not count. No late materials will be accepted. If a jurisdiction submits a resolution or ordinance requesting a ballot measure, but then wishes to withdraw it, they must submit a new resolution or ordinance withdrawing it. A letter from the district's legal counsel is not sufficient. The deadline to withdraw a resolution or ordinance is the same as the deadline to request a measure. Again, all materials must be received no later than 4:30 p.m. on the due date. Postmarks do not count. No late materials will be accepted. A ballot title consists of 3 elements. A caption, which contains the name of the jurisdiction, the type of measure, and a statement of the subject matter. A concise description of the measure and a question. The ballot title is limited to 75 words. Ballot titles are prepared by the prosecuting attorney's office, except for a city or town, which are prepared by the city attorney. King County Elections will send an order of election containing the official ballot title to each jurisdiction. Each measure can have different requirements to pass. The specific legal requirements are provided to King County Elections by the prosecuting attorney's office. The jurisdiction manual contains examples for bond and levy validations. Each year, King County Elections provides an updated validation summary report. This report is updated after the general election each year and is available on the King County Elections website. The report includes statistics for each jurisdiction, such as the total number of active registered voters at the time of the general election, the number of votes cast in the general election, and the minimum number of votes needed to validate a measure. Please note, if a jurisdiction is shared with another county, the other county figures will need to be added to the King County figures to get the total number needed for validation. Next is voters' pamphlet. For primary and general elections, all jurisdictions placing a measure on the ballot are automatically included in the local voters' pamphlet. For the spring special elections, the jurisdiction must specifically request a local voters' pamphlet in a resolution or ordinance. The request can be included in the resolution or ordinance requesting the ballot measure or in a separate resolution or ordinance. The deadline to submit is the same as the deadline to request a ballot measure. Per state law, if the county places a measure on the ballot in the spring and requests a local voters' pamphlet, all measures in that election are then automatically included in the pamphlet, regardless of whether or not the jurisdiction originally requested a pamphlet. The district must pay for their portion of the cost of publishing the pamphlet. Jurisdictions are responsible for appointing the members of both the pro and con committees that will write the statements for the voters' pamphlet. The committees consist of members of the public. They do not have to be registered to vote or reside within the district. Each committee is limited to 3 members, but the committee can have an unlimited number of people assist them to prepare the statements. State law requires jurisdictions to make a good faith effort to locate committee members. These efforts could include posting an announcement on the jurisdiction's website, making an announcement at public meetings, and/or placing an ad in a local paper. It is also the responsibility of the jurisdiction to inform the committees of the rules and deadlines related to the voters' pamphlet. If the jurisdiction is unable to locate members for a committee, the steps taken to locate members must be included in the email when submitting the appointment form to King County Elections. A local voters' pamphlet packet is available on the King County Elections website. This packet contains information for both jurisdiction administrators and the committee members, the committee appointment form which must be submitted to King County Elections, and a cover sheet the committees will use when submitting their statements. If participating in the voters' pamphlet, the jurisdiction must coordinate with their legal counsel to prepare an explanatory statement, which states the effect of a ballot measure if passed into law. The statement only covers the anticipated effect of the measure should it be passed into law. It must not be an argument in support of or against the measure. The statement can be prepared by the jurisdiction or their attorney. If prepared by the jurisdiction, the statement must be signed off by the district's attorney. Like all materials, the statements must be submitted to King County Elections no later than 4:30 p.m. on the date of the deadline. No late submissions will be accepted. King County Elections prefers to have the statements submitted via email with the statement attached as a Microsoft Word document. The pro and con committees prepare the statements in favor of and in opposition to a ballot measure. The statements are submitted directly to King County Elections, not through the jurisdiction. A cover sheet, which is included in the local voters' pamphlet packet, is required for each committee's statement. All statements must be received no later than 4:30 p.m. on the day of the deadline. No late submissions will be accepted. The day after the deadline to submit pro and con statements, King County Elections will email the opposing committee's statement to the committee members. Each committee then has the opportunity to write a rebuttal statement. The rebuttal is not required. The committee also submits this statement directly to King County Elections. As always, the statements must be received no later than 4:30 p.m. on the day of the deadline. No late submissions will be accepted. Space in the voter's pamphlet is limited, so formatting is very important. Format the statement as an essay. Text must be written in paragraphs. Tables, lists, and bullets are not allowed. To emphasize specific words or phrases, only use italics. Bolding, underlining, or all caps are not allowed. Prohibited formatting will be changed to italics. Proofread carefully. Your statement will be printed exactly as you submit it. Changes to your statement are not allowed once it has been submitted. King County Elections will not proofread any statement for errors in spelling, punctuation, or syntax. All statements are published as submitted. King County is not responsible for the validity or accuracy of the statements. An email address and phone number for the jurisdiction will be published in the local voters pamphlet. This contact should be able to respond to questions from voters regarding the jurisdiction's ballot measure. Lastly, miscellaneous items. Ballot drop box policy. The boxes at King County Elections headquarters and the King County Administration Building will be open. Boxes that fall within a 3-mile radius of participating jurisdictions will be open with some exceptions. For example, boxes that fall across a body of water might not be open. Elections' only role in the process is to determine whether or not the number of valid signatures on the petition is sufficient. The number of signatures required to validate a petition is determined by the jurisdiction based on the applicable charter, statute, or ordinance. Elections does not provide legal interpretation. Election costs are based upon a jurisdiction's proportionate share. Each jurisdiction's cost is determined by taking the total number of registered voters in the jurisdiction and dividing it by the total number of all registered voters in all participating jurisdictions in the election. Election costs vary from one election to the next, depending on a variety of factors. For instance, whether or not the election is held in an odd or even numbered year is a significant factor for determining costs in a primary or general election, but less of a factor for a special election held in February or April. This is primarily due to the number of participating jurisdictions in an odd-numbered year as opposed to an even-numbered year. Although the overall cost of a primary or general election from one year to the next is somewhat comparable, a general election shared by 10 jurisdictions is going to cost more per voter for each jurisdiction than an election shared by 135 jurisdictions. Special elections in February and April are often shared by a smaller number of jurisdictions, thus the proportional share is often greater. In the case of a single jurisdiction election, the cost would be 100%. King County Elections will prepare and send billing notifications to the jurisdictions. Payment is processed via interfund transfer. Jurisdictions typically do not process direct payment for election costs. Prior to deciding what election to place a measure on the ballot, jurisdictions may contact King County Elections to request an estimated election cost. Estimates will be based on a reasonable range, taking historical information into account, as well as specific known information about a particular election date. A specific cost or quote cannot be provided, as there are unknown factors such as the number of jurisdictions participating in an election. The cost of participating in a local voter's pamphlet is processed separately from election costs. This is done in part because the number of jurisdictions participating in an election is not always the same as those participating in the local voter's pamphlet. In addition, the cost allocation method is slightly different. Local voters pamphlet costs are determined for each participating jurisdiction based on the number of registered voters, but the cost is separated into two categories: printing and distribution. Printing costs are driven in large part by the number of pages in a pamphlet. Therefore, the allocation of printing costs are factored by the number of pages for each jurisdiction. Distribution costs are not impacted by the number of pages, and thus are calculated in the same way as election costs. The allocation of printing and distribution costs are combined for a full cost of participating in a local voters pamphlet. King County Elections prepares the voters pamphlet billing after the election costs have been processed. Unlike election costs, the payment for participating in the local voters pamphlet is not processed via interfund transfer. Instead, invoices are sent to participating jurisdictions to be processed for direct payment to King County Elections. A jurisdiction's participation in a local voters pamphlet depends on the election. During special elections held in February or April, jurisdictions must specifically request the production of a local voters pamphlet, or one will not be produced. During a primary or general election, all jurisdictions are automatically included in the local voters pamphlet. For questions, please contact us by phone at 206-296-1565 or by email at election.services@kingcounty.gov.